The moment my uncle opened his mouth at my cousin's wedding, I knew the night was going to go sideways. "Vivienne," he said, loud enough for half the reception hall to hear, swirling his glass of red wine like he was about to deliver a verdict, "when are you going to stop playing doctor and get a real career going? You're 32 years old. Your cousin just bought her second property." My cousin Brittany, the bride, giggled from across the table. She didn't correct him. Neither did my aunt. Neither did my mother, who was sitting right beside me, suddenly very interested in her bread roll. I smiled. I picked up my water glass. I said, "I'm doing fine, Uncle Gerald." He shook his head like I'd said something sad. "Playing it safe your whole life. That's the problem with your generation. No ambition." I was, at that moment, 4 weeks away from being appointed Chief of Emergency Medicine at Northgate General Hospital in Toronto, one of the largest trauma centers in Ontario. I was 32 years old, and I had spent the last decade building something that had nothing to do with second properties or wedding receptions or my uncle's opinion of ambition. But I didn't say any of that. I just smiled, folded my napkin on my lap, and let him talk. That night would come back to me 6 months later, sitting across a conference table from my Uncle Gerald's youngest son, my cousin Marcus, watching him sweat through his dress shirt as I held his application in my hands. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. I grew up in Oakville, Ontario, the younger of 2 daughters in a family that had a very clear idea of what success looked like. My older sister Danielle was the standard. She was 4 years older than me, effortlessly charming. The kind of person who got straight A's without appearing to try. She went into finance, got her MBA from Rotman, married well, and by the time she was 30 had a house in Leaside and a LinkedIn profile that my mother forwarded to relatives without being asked. I was the one who wanted to be a doctor. This sounds like it should be impressive. In most families, it would be. In mine, it was complicated. My father thought medicine was noble but impractical for a woman, his words, not mine, delivered at the dinner table when I was 17 as though it were a simple observation about weather. My mother worried about the years of school, the debt, the hours. My Uncle Gerald, who had made his money in real estate and believed that anything you couldn't flip in 5 years wasn't worth pursuing, told me flatly that I was wasting my potential. "Vivienne's got the brains," he used to say at family dinners, with that particular tone that made a compliment sound like a diagnosis. "It's a shame she's going to spend them on other people's problems." Only my grandmother, Nana Petra, who had come from Montreal and had strong opinions about independence and stronger opinions about Gerald, ever told me I was doing the right thing. She would squeeze my hand at the table and say, in her particular mix of English and Quebecois French that she never fully let go of, "Don't let anyone tell you what your life is worth, mon ange. They don't know what you're carrying." Nana Petra passed away during my 2nd year of residency. I wasn't able to get to the funeral in time. I scrubbed into an emergency surgery. Instead, a 17-year-old who'd been in a car accident on the 401, and I thought about her the entire time. I think she would have understood. Medical school at University of Toronto was the hardest thing I had ever done and also, in a strange way, the most clarifying. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who thought the way I thought, who found the human body endlessly interesting, who could debate the ethics of triage at midnight over bad coffee, who didn't look at me like I was unusual for caring so much about something that didn't have an obvious return on investment. I specialized in emergency medicine because I liked the speed of it, the way it required you to be completely present, to make decisions with incomplete information and no margin for error. People called it stressful. I called it honest. In the ER, there was no time to perform. You either knew what you were doing or you didn't. I finished my residency at Sunnybrook. I joined Northgate General as an attending physician at 29. Within 2 years, I had published 3 peer-reviewed papers, implemented a new triage protocol that reduced critical patient wait times by 22%, and quietly, steadily, built a reputation that my family knew nothing about because I had stopped telling them things that they would find ways to diminish. This was not bitterness. This was efficiency. Family dinners continued. Christmas in Oakville, Thanksgiving at my aunt's house in Burlington, the occasional birthday party or anniversary brunch that my mother insisted on attending, and therefore so did I. I showed up. I was pleasant. I deflected questions about my personal life and answered questions about my job in the vaguest possible terms. "Still at the hospital?" my uncle would ask. "Still at the hospital," I would confirm. "You ever think about going into something more scalable?" I would smile and reach for the salted butter. The wedding was in September. Brittany married a man named Trevor who worked in commercial insurance and had very strong opinions about craft beer. The reception was at a hall in Mississauga, tastefully decorated, open bar, a DJ who played Bruno Mars 4 times. I sat at the family table and watched my uncle hold court and told myself it didn't matter, that I was there for Brittany, who I actually liked, and that I could survive 4 hours of Gerald. The comment about playing doctor landed during the main course. My mother still said nothing. My aunt laughed a little, the way she always did when Gerald said something, cutting a small, apologetic laugh that meant she agreed but wanted plausible deniability. What my uncle didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 2 days before the wedding, I had received and accepted a formal offer letter. Chief of Emergency Medicine, Northgate General Hospital. The position came with a salary that would have made Gerald put down his wine glass, a team of 47 physicians and residents reporting to me, and the responsibility of overseeing one of the busiest emergency departments in the Greater Toronto Area. I had told no one in my family. I had told my best friend Cora, who had screamed so loudly on the phone that I had to hold it away from my ear. I had told my mentor, Dr. Anand Krishnamurthy, who had shaken my hand with both of his and said he was not surprised. I had told my landlord, because I was finally going to be able to move into a larger apartment. My family found out the way they found out everything about me. Eventually, partially, and through channels they found unsatisfying. My mother saw something on the hospital's website. A photo, my name in a press release about new department leadership. She called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice carrying the particular mixture of pride and injury that she had perfected over decades. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked. "I didn't want to make a big deal of it," I said, which was partially true. The whole truth was more complicated. The whole truth was that I had spent so many years having my choices questioned and my direction doubted and my milestones treated as curiosities rather than accomplishments that I had learned to protect my wins before they could be minimized. I had learned to wait until something was done before I mentioned it, and even then, I often didn't mention it at all. "Your Uncle Gerald is going to feel terrible," my mother said. "He doesn't have to feel anything," I said. "It's my job, not his." She made a small sound that I had learned, over 32 years, to interpret as agreement she wasn't quite ready to voice. I moved into my new role in November. The first 3 months were relentless restructuring, hiring, rebuilding a staff scheduling system that had been causing problems for years, sitting in meetings I hadn't known existed, learning the specific politics of hospital administration that no one teaches you in medical school. I loved it in the way you love something that is genuinely hard, that asks more of you than you expected, and then asks more again. I was good at it. I had known I would be good at it. That wasn't arrogance, it was the same evidence-based assessment I applied to everything. I had seen the problems in the department from the inside for 3 years. I had documented them, proposed solutions, been told to wait. Now I didn't have to wait anymore. March came. 8 months after the wedding. 4 months into my role. My assistant, a wonderfully efficient woman named Patricia, who had been with the hospital for 19 years and knew where every body was buried, knocked on my office door on a Tuesday morning with a folder of interview candidates for a new senior administrative coordinator position in the department. We were growing. I needed someone who could manage scheduling, liaise with other departments, handle the volume of communications that had increased significantly since the restructuring. "The candidates look strong overall," Patricia said, setting the folder on my desk. "I've flagged 3 that HR thought were especially worth your time. One of them," she paused, in the way Patricia paused when she had something to say that she wasn't sure she should say. "Patricia. One of them is a Marcus Calloway," she said carefully. The application lists an Oakville address. HR didn't make the connection, but I thought, given your family name. I looked up from the folder. Calloway was my mother's maiden name. She had kept it hyphenated. Gerald Calloway was my mother's brother. Marcus was Gerald's youngest. He was 27, 5 years younger than me, and the last time I had seen him had been at Brittany's wedding, where he had spent most of the evening talking loudly about a startup idea he had that involved something to do with AI-generated real estate listings. He had not asked me a single question about my life. I opened to his application. The resume was well formatted. University of Guelph, Business Administration, 2 previous positions in office coordination. The cover letter was competent, clearly written with help, or at least with the assistance of something that made it sound more polished than the Marcus I knew. Send him the interview slot on Thursday at 2, I said. Patricia looked at me. He's qualified for the interview, I said. We assess everyone the same way. Book it. She nodded and left. I turned back to my desk and sat for a long moment, looking out the window at the gray March sky over the hospital parking structure. I thought about my uncle's voice at the wedding. I thought about my grandmother's hand on mine. I thought about 17 years of small comments and dinner table verdicts and the particular exhaustion of being seen as less than by people who had never once asked to see more. Then I picked up my pen and went back to work. Thursday came with freezing rain and the particular end-of-winter grimness that Toronto does so well. I had 3 surgeries to oversee in the morning, a department budget review at noon, and 2 interviews in the afternoon. Marcus was the second. I had arranged the interviews the way I arranged everything methodically, without sentiment. Patricia would greet candidates in the main lobby and bring them up. I would interview in my office, which was not a large or impressive room but had, as one of my residents had once pointed out, a view of the CN Tower on clear days. Today was not a clear day. The first candidate was excellent, a woman named Deborah, with 12 years of healthcare administration experience, who answered every question directly and asked 3 genuinely good ones in return. I noted her at the top of the list before she was even out of the elevator. At 5 minutes before 2 o'clock, I heard voices in the hallway outside my office. Then Patricia knocked. "Your 2 o'clock is here, Dr. Calloway Marsh." I looked up. Marcus walked in wearing a suit that was slightly too formal for the position he was applying for, which told me he was nervous and had been given advice by someone who didn't know the culture of the role. He was carrying a leather portfolio that looked new. His hair was neat. He looked like he had prepared. Then he saw me. I watched it happen in real time, the recognition, the confusion, the recalibration. His mouth opened slightly. He stopped walking for just a moment, one foot still in the doorway. "Vivienne?" he said. "Marcus," I said. "Come in. Close the door, please." He closed the door. He crossed the room. He sat in the chair across from my desk, the chair that candidates always sat in, on the other side of the desk from where I sat, and for a long moment, he simply looked at me with an expression I had not seen on a Calloway face before. It looked something like awe, which was uncomfortable to witness, and also something like the specific shame of a person who is realizing, rapidly, that they have spent years being wrong about someone. I didn't know he started. "That I was the hiring manager?" I said pleasantly. "That's fine. HR handles the initial screening. Your application came through the standard process." I opened his folder. "Let's get started. Can you walk me through your experience with multi-stakeholder scheduling in a high-volume environment?" He blinked. "Marcus," I said, same pleasant tone. "The interview." He straightened. To his credit, he pulled himself together. He answered the scheduling question. He answered the next one about conflict resolution. He was not the strongest candidate, his experience was real but limited, and some of his answers had the quality of someone reciting preparation rather than drawing on instinct, but he wasn't unprepared. He had done the work of showing up, ready, or close to it. We were about 20 minutes in when he broke. It happened during a question about handling urgent communication under pressure. He was mid-answer when he stopped and set his portfolio down on his knees and looked at me with something that had moved past shame into something raw. "I owe you an apology," he said. I kept my expression neutral. You don't owe me anything in this room except answers to the interview questions. I know, but I need to say it. He looked at his hands for a moment. My dad at the wedding. And before that? Always. The stuff he said to you. I never said anything. I thought that was just how he was. I didn't think about what it was like to be on the receiving end of it. He looked up. And I did the same thing. At the wedding, I never even asked you how things were going. I was too busy talking about myself. The room was quiet except for the sound of the heating system and, faintly, the overhead announcement system from somewhere in the hospital below. I appreciate you saying that, I said. I mean it. I know you do. I looked at him for a moment, really looked at him, the way I looked at a patient, trying to assess what was actually there rather than what I expected to see. He was 27. He was starting to understand something that some people never understood at all. That was worth something. The apology is accepted, Marcus. And it has no bearing on this interview, in either direction. Is that clear? He nodded. Good, I said. Let's finish up. I walked him through the remaining questions. He steadied himself and finished well better than his earlier answers. Actually, as though the honesty had cleared something out and let him think more cleanly. When it was done, he stood and shook my hand, and his handshake was firm, which it hadn't been at the start. At the door, he paused. Can I ask you something? Not about the job. I waited. How long have you been all of this? He gestured vaguely at the office, the title on the door, the window with its gray view of the city. Chief for 4 months, I said, and attending for 3 years before that, a doctor for longer than that. He absorbed this. And you never said anything. At family dinners. You just listened, I said. Mostly. He nodded slowly, with the expression of someone doing arithmetic in their head and not loving the answer they were arriving at. Thank you for the interview, Vivienne, he said. I mean, Dr. Calloway Marsh, sorry. Either is fine, I said. Have a safe drive home. The roads are bad today. After he left, I sat in my office for a few minutes without doing anything. Patricia knocked after a while, and I told her I was fine and asked for the Deborah file again. Deborah got the job. She was the right person for it. She started the following month and within 6 weeks had reorganized the communication system in ways that made 3 different department heads send me grateful emails. Marcus did not get the job. I called him personally to let him know, which I did not do for every candidate, but which felt right. I told him his experience was solid and that I would be glad to provide a reference if he applied elsewhere in the hospital network. He thanked me, and his voice only cracked slightly. My Uncle Gerald found out what had happened approximately 11 days later, through a chain of information that ran from Marcus to my aunt to my mother to Gerald's kitchen table, and then, inevitably, to my phone. He called on a Sunday afternoon. I was meal prepping and almost didn't answer, but some old reflex, some sense that this was a conversation that needed to happen made me pick up. Your cousin tells me he came to see you, Gerald said. His voice had a quality I didn't recognize at first. It took me a moment to identify it. Uncertainty. Gerald Calloway. Uncertain. He applied for a position in my department, I said. He interviewed. We went with another candidate. Silence. He said you were professional about it. That's the job, I said. More silence. Then, Vivienne. I didn't know. I know you didn't. I should have. He stopped. Gerald did not do this often. Gerald stopped mid-sentence about as frequently as the 401 flowed smoothly at rush hour. I shouldn't have said the things I said. At the wedding. Before that, I was quiet, because I had learned, in the ER, that silence is often the most useful thing you can offer a person who is finding their way to something true. I thought I was being honest with you, he said. I thought I was, I don't know, preparing you for something, being realistic. You were telling me what you saw, I said. You just weren't seeing very much. Another silence, and this one felt different, less like absence and more like wait. Your Nana used to say you'd do something worth seeing, he said finally. I thought she was just being a grandmother. She was being a grandmother, I said. She was also right. He made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost something else. I'm proud of you, Vivian. For what it's worth, coming from me right now. I thought about what to say to that. I thought about the wedding, and the dinner tables, and the 17-year-old on the 401 that night of my grandmother's funeral, and Cora screaming on the phone when I told her about the offer letter, and Patricia's careful voice saying my cousin's name, and Marcus's face when he walked into my office and found me on the other side of the desk. It's worth something, I said. Thank you, Uncle Gerald. We didn't talk long after that. There wasn't a lot more to say, and I think we both knew that what had been said was enough for one Sunday afternoon. I put the phone down and went back to my meal prep, roasting vegetables, something with chickpeas, a pot of lentil soup that would last me through a busy week, and I let myself feel, just for a moment, the particular satisfaction of a person who has spent a long time waiting for something and has discovered, finally, that they were right to wait. The thing I have come to understand, after all of it, is that I did not do any of this to prove a point. I know that sounds like something people say when they want to seem above it all, so let me be more precise. I started down this path because I wanted to be a doctor, because emergency medicine made sense to me in a way that almost nothing else ever had, because I liked the clarity of it and the stakes of it and the fact that it asked you to be fully present or not at all. I did not do it to make my uncle feel something at a wedding, or to sit across a conference table from my cousin and watch him recalibrate everything he thought he knew about me. Those things happened because I was building something real, and real things have consequences you don't always plan for. But I would be lying if I said that none of it mattered. It mattered. The night of the wedding, I drove home on the QW, and I felt the particular loneliness of being in a room full of family and being comprehensively unseen. That loneliness was real. The years of it were real. You can refuse to let something stop you and still acknowledge that it was hard. What I know now, which I did not know at 17, is that the people who doubt you are usually telling you more about the limits of their own vision than the limits of your potential. My Uncle Gerald looked at me and saw someone who was unlikely to succeed by the only measures he had ever learned to count. He wasn't malicious. He was just looking through the wrong lens, and nobody had ever handed him a different one. I do not carry resentment for Gerald. I'm not sure I ever did, really, though there were years when I carried something adjacent to it, a tightness, a guardedness, a careful distance I maintained between my real life and the version of my life that got discussed at family tables. That distance protected me. It also cost me things. I missed chances to be known by people who, when the lens shifted, turned out to be capable of something more than what I'd seen from them. Marcus is working now at a hospital in Hamilton. He messaged me a few months after the interview to let me know, and to say that the conversation in my office had changed something for him, not about the job, but about how he thought about other people's paths. I told him I was glad and that he should keep going. I meant it. My mother started reading my published papers. She doesn't understand all of them, she tells me, but she reads them. She told me recently that she mentioned them at her book club and that her friend Sandra had said it was remarkable what her daughter had accomplished. My mother said she had agreed. Progress, I think, is almost always slower and stranger and less cinematic than you expect it to be. There is no single moment where someone turns to you and says, "We were wrong and you were right, and here is your acknowledgement." Life doesn't work that way, or at least mine didn't. What happened instead was quieter and more gradual, a phone call on a Sunday, a message from a cousin, a mother who started reading things she used to dismiss, incremental shifts in the way people look at you when you walk into the room. I don't need them to call me remarkable. I never needed that, even when I thought I did. What I needed, what I think most people need, is simply to be seen accurately. Not celebrated, just seen. For the work to be witnessed, even by one or two people, even late, even imperfectly. My grandmother saw it. She saw it before I had done any of it, which is the particular gift of people who love you without conditions attached. The ER is loud right now. On the other side of these hospital walls, I can hear it faintly, the way you always can if you've worked in one long enough. There is always something happening. Someone is always at the beginning of the worst night of their life, and someone else is turning a corner towards something better, and my team is in the middle of all of it, making decisions with incomplete information and no margin for error, the way we always do. That is the work. That is what I built. That is what no one at a family dinner table could see from where they were sitting. And that is enough. It has always been enough. If you're carrying something similar, a dream that someone else decided wasn't practical, a path that people in your life can't quite see the shape of, an ambition that gets called naive every time you bring it to the table, I want you to hear this clearly. Their vision is not the ceiling. What they can imagine for you is not the limit of what you are capable of. The people who dismiss you are not the authority on your life. They are just people with their own limited vantage points and their own unlived possibilities and their own reasons for needing you to be smaller than you are. Build the thing anyway. Go quiet if you have to. Protect your progress until it's real enough to stand on its own. Be kind, even to the people who weren't kind to you, because bitterness is weight you carry, and they don't, and you'll need both hands free for everything that's ahead of you. Your work will speak eventually. It always does. Give it time to find its voice.